mode.
Good morning, everyone, and we are here in Finland and working together. I'm glad you're here on these very prominent glamours that are in the political and social field at the present time. Last time we worked on the glamour of dictatorship. I think we're going to continue with that. It's kind of a first-rate glamour, but on the other hand, it has a lot of the excuse me, with self-centeredness, which can come with the fourth ray as well, and kind of a self-satisfaction with one's own methods. And it tends to be an approach which does not consider the value of those who are surrounding one. So, I'm sorry. It works out as egotism anyway, or egoism, and it's just a very limited point of view, plus the ambition for power. And now in the world's two leading democracies, in the United Kingdom and also in the United States, and the two areas, I'm so sorry, the two areas with prominent second-ray souls, this problem is very prominent because it's as if there are forces arrayed to defeat democracy. And democracy is the method by which the hierarchy seeks to work. You know how it goes, and I don't think we're quite ready for the monarchy of Shambhala yet. And we seem to be outgrowing some of the communistic tendencies which are relating to something humanity has designed as a governmental system. So that's what we're going to work on today, and I hope I can have that morning voice at the moment, and I hope I can be clear. I hope I can be clear with you. Now, let's just sort of come together and offer ourselves as a group to work in the way that Master DK has specified when dealing with the dissipation of glamour. This steady application of ours using, I think, probably some very occult technique here has got to have a good effect. And we will keep at it because, this is a critical time for humanity. And we recall Master DK telling us that if more disciples had been properly engaged in the period before the Second World War, it need not have precipitated as it did. So we don't want to repeat that mistake. And we want to make sure that the forces of democracy do re-energize and begin to prevail over the short-sighted and not very talented dictators who have arisen here and there, subsuming as their right the direction of all kind of people who know far better even than they do. So we'll work on that, and we'll work on that together on behalf of humanity and on behalf of the spiritual hierarchy and on behalf of the divine plan. I'd like to, welcome you here, and Alex and Anna and Annette, Barbara, Catherine, George, Hideko, Karen and Kim, Leslie, Margot, Mariana, Mariut, Martha and Rebecca, Risto, Stacia, Walter, and Veronica, and over here on the staff side, Joe is here and Tuya is here. So we're going to get right into our reading for today. This may be, we'll see how long we go today, maybe a little a little shorter. We've had we have some little chihuahuas in our house, and one of them has been quite sick. So we have veterinarian appointments and all kinds of things. So we'll see how long we can go. All right. Now, basically, we worked on the finishing up of individual glamours, but of course they can be transposed to group glamours, naturally. And we finished up with the glamours of the second ray and of the third. Those being among the most important for humanity, because it is in the union of the generically second ray soul and the generically third ray personality that humanity's difficulties are largely focused. These two rays are out of adjustment with each other, and I think on our particular planet, in which or on which we are told that our planetary logos has a problem with personality in the cosmic sense, we do have this issue of the integration of the personality, and not only that, but even more important, its integration with the soul impulse. And, if we can emerge from our occult studies closer to bringing soul and personality together in a harmonious sense, then really we will have accomplished something. Now we're kind of working on the fourth ray at the moment, and there are several things that are said here, and let's see if we can relate to them. Master DK had quite a few of people with some kind of fourth ray expression in their ray chart. He did say an interesting thing. He said that the fourth ray mind was an important part of his of approach to him and of his work. And I think there we're not talking about the lower mind of conflict, but a higher intuitive ability in the mind. I think he's trying to lead us from concrete mindedness through the abstract mind and onto the buddhic plane, where we can really begin to cultivate the intuition. And there's a couple more here. I don't know if I mentioned Walter and Vera. Hi, and anyway, we seem to be gathering our group. All right, so look, if you relate to these at all, make note of it, and you'll have a chance to say whether they have been in your life. This first glamour. Well, let's see. Actually, what I'd like to do is I sometimes go over here to. I go over here to Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, and there's a place, and maybe I can. This is a little small, and I'd like to make it a little bigger, if I can. And then such a wonderful book, that Psych 2, and let's just see if I can find a more or less place where he deals with these matters of how it begins and then how it ends. And usually, of course, the ending is better than the beginning. And here we have the fourth ray and all of its various liabilities. And some of us, if we have a fourth ray personality or fourth ray mind, there's not too many fourth ray souls right now, but they're coming into incarnation, And I'm going to make this smaller and just kind of read through it a little bit so you can get a chance to relate to it. And a glamour can be built on any of these early expressions. Confused combat, you don't know who you're fighting, and you're fighting yourself half the time. And this sense of the high and low and the hill and valley experience. If you're a good mystic, it certainly helps to have the fourth ray, because it'll send you to the heights and down into the depths. The darkness, any artist knows about this, the darkness which precedes form expression, I suppose, is a higher kind of expression of this particular quality when we're not under the effect of glamour, and when we're ready to conceive and bring forth something that the world needs, and the higher beings do this all the time. Now, this is interesting. It's an intuitive ray, but the intuition is veiled in the early days, and people with a lot of pride always make the mistake that their psychism, which is a quality that was rampant in Atlantis, is somehow their intuition, which it isn't. So they get caught in the veil of psychism, and they mistake those images and those indications for the real straight knowledge of intuition. And then you'll find this next one important, because I think a lot of us get into this. I certainly know I have the sensing of inharmony and cooperation with the part and not the whole. You try to restore some degree of harmony in the small sense, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem in the larger sense. In general, these fourth ray types, identification with humanity, the fourth creative hierarchy, that's okay, except it is rather a torn kingdom, and we've for many millions of years been identified with this fourth creative hierarchy, and people like ourselves are trying to make our way into the fifth kingdom of nature. It's still the fourth creative hierarchy for a while. It's not yet the fifth creative hierarchy of solar angels. That will come in our training following the sixth initiation. At least that's how it is now. But there are higher parts to the fourth creative hierarchy. And also you can be a planetary life, like the great Chohans, and still be members in a way of the fourth creative hierarchy, but you've advanced in terms of the kingdoms of nature. But you know how it is, you look at the television and you read the newspaper and people are just embroiled in these soap opera type emotions and relationships, and that can be very defeating when it comes to really perceiving what truth is. Undue recognition of that which is produced by speech. Well, Mercury is a fourth ray planet, and I guess you could say that people are pretty touchy on this ray, so one has to be careful what one says, and eventually they can become a very good example of how to use speech correctly. Abnormal sensitivity to that which is the not self. Well, we need to pull away from identification with all of our limited perceptions, and especially our perception of what we are, and finally focus within the soul, because the pairs of opposites are ruled by this particular ray. And what we learn when we study Libra, which may have some fourth ray connected with it, is that the pairs of opposites are vertical. The ones we're really concerned about are the vertical ones, in which there's a higher value to the higher of the pairs of opposites and lower value to the lower. When you come to the horizontal pairs of opposites, you can't make a definitive statement like that. I mean, is hot better than cold? Is up better than down? There's all kinds of opposites in which the extremes do not have a qualitative value which is better or worse. Just depends on the circumstances. But the pairs of opposites we're concerned with, particularly, have a lot to do with soul or personality. And then, constant points of crisis. Well, we said the other day in one of these programs, well, if you're not having a crisis, why aren't you having one? But it all depends how you handle it. If you handle it intelligently, you'll advance. But if your life is just a turmoil, well, you won't. And it'll just be a troubled and disturbed life for yourself, and you'll probably help other people be troubled and disturbed too. So anyway, these are some of the early indications of those who have a powerful ray 4 somehow, the personality of which there are a lot of them. And although interestingly, the majority of human beings at this time in this place have personalities that are either on the third ray or the sixth ray. He tells us those are the two most prominent of the personality rays. And there's going to be a flood of fourth ray souls coming in, but he tells us this is a good thing because peace will eventuate from it. So, good things arise, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for harmony and unity, and the intuition coming forth, and we're looking at that intuitive quality we call pure reason, where you really understand the relationship of all things on a more archetypal level, and wisdom, the wisdom which we can access when we start really to align with the soul and with the angel of the presence who is representing the solar angel. So that gives you kind of an idea of where we've been and where we're going with the fourth ray. And I'll bet, if I were to ask, a lot of you feel that the fourth ray may be prominent in your makeup somewhere. I know I've been on the fourth ray personality for quite a while, and maybe some of you have, or the fourth ray mind, and it's not absolutely determined that it must be that way. But this is, once I did an analysis of all of the disciples in the Tibetan's teaching group. I think there were about 50 of them or so. And I tried to say, well, if I just look at the numbers, nothing very sophisticated, what would the common ray chart look like? The most frequently found ray chart, I thought. So I determined that it would be the second ray soul, that was most prominent, the sixth ray personality, that was most prominent, and the fourth ray mind, and the sixth ray astral body, and believe it or not, the seventh ray physical body. Now, it turned out there was not one disciple who actually had that particular combination. At least I've never found that particular person. But on the other hand, that would have been the general average of the indications which he gave. So the 246 line was very, very important, and the seventh ray line coming in was important. Some, of course, had the fifth ray and the third ray and all the other rays, but these were the prominent ones. Okay, now, so here's this first glamour, and you'll recognize that we kind of went over that in a little bit. The glamour of harmony, aiming at personal comfort and satisfaction, and sometimes we call this by this name that you will probably recognize, peace at any price. And I'll, make it a little different color so we can differentiate it from what DK says. And, we'd like our environment to be undisturbed, but if we always are going for this state of comfort and harmony, we may miss altogether the emerging values which are causing the disturbance and which are trying to appear, even though a disturbance is the result. I recall now, it's going to be kind of interesting. China doesn't really have the fourth ray; it has Libra, at least in the rays that are given to us. I don't know about the mental ray and all the rest, but we're given the personality ray and the soul ray, and it's a first ray soul and a third ray personality, but it's a Libra personality. And he tells us that Confucius, the member of the hierarchy, who was Confucius, is going to incarnate in China again. And the result of his incarnation will be a disturbance. Well, you know how the hierarchy looks at these things. What may be a passing disturbance to a member of the hierarchy turns out to be an appalling spectacle when it comes to the way we human beings judge things. So I can certainly confess to this one, the glamour of harmony, I mean, can't we, I can really, I've lived my life that way, and aiming at personal comfort and satisfaction. Just, don't bring that up. Must we deal with this now? I mean, can't we just have a little peace in our surroundings? And I might avoid the larger issue. Does anybody feel you can relate to that? Just that we should have one of those voting things, where you can check off and say, yeah, I can relate to that. It's peace itself. It comes from, it has to be built, let's just say, the Peace University down there in Costa Rica and maybe other places, they learn the economic and many philosophical antecedents of peace. It's how we live together, and how we share, and there are many things, and there are big problems to be solved. Now, if we just want to just have it be quiet and comfortable and not filled with conflict, must we always be fighting? Because this is the war of strife and battle, the array of war and strife and battle, and humanity is a warring kingdom. Must we always be fighting? Look at the world today, my God, all those terrible conflicts, and people are suffering so much, But why is this? And DK would say, well, it's really the emergence of the will. That's what he would say. Don't you see it? That all these people who have been put down for so many centuries are grasping the will and trying to make their will be felt. And then this is the reason for the conflict. Now, if we make that subside, just say, all right, let's be quiet about this. Let's not fight so much. Then that will may never emerge. This whole question about who is a freedom fighter and who's a terrorist, and one country's freedom fighter is another country's terrorist. It all depends on your perspective. So first, there may be quite some battles as the fourth ray emerges, but he says there's no real need for anxiety because the fourth ray is emerging, and he's talking about the peace potentials of all these fourth ray souls coming in. And of course, he says an interesting thing, it's emerging from its monadic aspect. Now, there are fourth ray monads, and they appear on the monadic plane, and we don't know the numbers, but maybe those numbers are significant. We are living here in the Scandinavian countries, and they have a reputation with their Libra soul for the evocation of peace among warring parties, and we've had some brilliant examples emerging from Finland and the Scandinavian countries of people who can go into any war-torn place, and they have that balance and that larger point of view, and they are not victim of short-term harmonious thinking. We have to look at the larger picture. Anybody want to say anything about that? Or write anything? You're welcome to if you want to. It's just, when you solve a problem, just because, Master Moria talks about this. He says people are so silly. When the wind is blowing and the ocean waves are kind of vigorous, people think this is a bad thing when it's really a very good thing. What would they rather have? The peace and quiet of a cemetery? So, it gives us a warning about having to expect at least some turbulence as the higher values emerge, and then maybe we will come into that era where we have earned the real harmony, but it's not immediate. And we have to be ready to fight for harmony without falling into the glamour of fighting for harmony. Okay, the glamour of war. Well, we've seen that. I mean, it was very interesting. If you look at some of the war fever that grips people as the thought of war and glory and all that stuff sweeps through the population, you'll see some very unhappy demonstrations. I mean, this was the way for the Civil War. I don't know about the Revolutionary War, but people were just swept off their feet in listening about the Civil War, and maybe for a very just cause, but on both sides it was. And when we deal with World War I, it was a very beglamored time when signing up, let's say, to in our countries, in the Allied countries here, to attack the Hun. See, the Germans were characterized as the Hun. You know, we think about Attila the Hun. It was a completely glamorous misrepresentation. All of these kind of alliances brought people into the war, but they thought they would go out on the field of glory and come back with glory and all that. And basically, they came back crippled after years of trench warfare in the mud. It was totally deglamorizing situation here. And
Michael.
I see it right here. Yeah, is that? Yeah, I got it here. Wait a second.
Yeah, Michael.
Oh, Tuya, is that you, Tuya?
Yeah, me.
Okay,
Good
good.
morning.
Oh, good morning.
Yeah, I was.
Go ahead.
I don't have now my headset. Sorry. I hope you can hear well. So I was just thinking again. We have been talking about during these past days about this the purpose of the crisis, and maybe we can think about the battling. That how important it really is to have them in order to develop one's mind. I think we all come up to that just standing always in one's own position will not lead in these warring energies. It will not lead anywhere. It just continues, and when we study the human history, and even now there was some few days ago telling about Israel and this how Israel is thinking about again conquering something back, and this lying upon the past, that what was mine, I need that back because it was mine. And always these crises and clamors they are related to that what we have own or what is our feeling. And in that sense, the crisis gives us the moment to contemplate and to pause what it is really. Do I need that? Is it necessary? Would it serve anything if that earlier condition would come back, or whatever it can be? But this, that it forces us, in order to go through, it forces us to really take a higher position. And in that sense, when we think about the plane of harmony, can be looked from our perspective, being the buddhic plane. So thinking about the buddhic mind, the intuitive mind or harmonizing mind, is about this solution, that how to harmonize, take all of these parts and then bring them into higher states, and somehow hold within oneself all that which is not still maybe in total harmony, but it's our mind anyway which is going to help in this process.
It's good points. And the word is all, you know. You repeated the word all. Take all this into consideration. Take all this. And, you know, our problem is that a lot of people just focus on the part and achieving harmony within a small part, which is not real harmony in the larger situation. You know, if we achieve harmony in us, let's say in one country, it doesn't mean that humanity itself will have a harmonious development.
Yeah.
I saw. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just say the off sentence. I then continue a little bit.
Okay. Well, I was just, there's a contrast here because Master DK was looking at the disciples during the war, and he was saying here, and I guess it's Dinah 1. To all of you I say, my love surrounds you, and the aura of the ashram, of which I am the center, stands like a great defending wall around you and around all who are battling for the right. See that you battle. So there are just causes and there are just conflicts, and if people had maintained a thoroughly neutral position, we might all be under Nazi influence at this time. You know, the influence of the Axis powers. So there are just conflicts, but we have to discriminate. That's the thing. And if we seek, a lot of people seek a too early peace before the issues are really sorted out. I think someone was asking here, maybe it was Stacia, we'll get to it, whether the attempt to achieve harmony is not in itself a fairly contentious activity. So, it just depends on what we're fighting for. We are a fighting kingdom, and we have to choose our battles wisely. They were very, this is interesting. Look, Gandhi, he's much celebrated by many people. He had the sun in Libra, he had Libra rising. He was a bringer of peace in many respects. And they said that if he continued in his way, the Nazi powers would win in India. And they made a great inroad during the war because his nonviolence refused to take up the battle against the forces of evil. So they don't look at him in the same way. Yeah. Anyway, you go ahead, finish. Yeah.
Yeah, what you were bringing up with is so difficult question when we think about our points and where we are standing, how we are learning really to know what is the best. These are extreme examples what was going on there, but now what we have at our stake and on our plates is something similar, because there are so many things happening in the world which is questioning the whole balance of the planet. It's not only in one little place somewhere, but it is the question of the whole balance in our environment on this planet. But thinking about this time of Virgo and the access to Pisces, DK says how Pisces is taking all
from all the
within
signs,
itself.
Yeah.
From all the signs, and in those triangles where the Pisces is. So it's a Virgo, Pisces. Was it Leo?
Okay, yeah, it was Leo, Virgo, Pisces was the triangle we were studying the other day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where what is considering about how we actually will uplift our individual sides. And this now, the time what we are living is extremely important again for the whole group of disciples to try to go back within our minds in that stage of Pisces and trying to understand, because this access will help us in those warring energies to reach this place where we are supposed to see all parts and put in one unit, or put in one higher scene, higher understanding.
Well, I will say this, that finally in Pisces, we are going to achieve a very powerful peace, because the planet of peace, which is Venus, is exalted in that sign. And remember, the Christ is the Prince of Peace, and his astrological energies are particularly Pisces and Libra. DK goes on here a little bit and says some very important things about battle and struggle. See that you battle. You can then, if you will, sense this loving protection. Each day, if you will, you can put yourself en rapport with your master. We are not blind or uncaring. We know, however, and this is a really important sentence, we know, however, that there are worse evils than death and pain. We know that this is the hour of humanity's greatest opportunity, and that still extends into our present day. and that if men can pass triumphantly through this, and by the strength of their own souls surmount this very present evil, then the evolution of humanity will be hastened beyond all that was believed possible. It will constitute a release, self-achieved and self-initiated. This means as much in the life of mankind as it means in the life of the individual disciple. Now this is important, the chance that and that opportunity must not be taken from man. The gained spiritual and eternal values are of far greater importance than his temporary agony. So when we're trying to think, do we fight? Do we struggle? Do we attempt somehow to enter into the battle? This is the phrase that should ring in our minds, and we have struggles very similar to this possibly coming up. That's why DK said, look, we in the hierarchy, we know what is going to happen, but we are not allowed to say, we are not permitted to elaborate more upon it. So this takes a lot of discrimination. And what I would suggest, folks, go to your discipleship book and right around page 101, 102, read what it has to say about how the masters suffer a great spiritual agony watching what humanity is doing and what is expected of us. So just get into this, read it, and bring it home. Now, there were a couple of, let's see now, going over here, and Stacia was asking, is not harmony through conflict or turbulent activity? Well, I think, Stacia, yes, but when there is sufficient skill in action, which, by the way, was one of the qualities which Alice Bailey was supposed to develop, then the transition from conflict to harmony may be smoother. I mean, and probably you've noticed this yourself, or a conflict arises and people say, well, what are we going to do here? And you, because you are experienced, or any of us, say, okay, look, I know how to handle this, because your experience can help you bring the harmony out of that conflict. So it just depends on how practiced we are. Usually humanity is blundering along and making a real mess of things and crashing from pillar to post, and only waking up when, conflict has just become terrible. But it doesn't have to be that way, and it won't be that way. There'll be something better on the horizon as we're intelligent about this fourth ray and how to use it. And Kim is asking here, does this relate to having attachment to one's surroundings and being nice? Yeah, I would say so. Kim. We can create a superficial harmony which does not touch the depths of possible harmony whatsoever, and the conflict will just reemerge later and maybe in a more intense form. And that's why, when Tuya was using the word all and all, we have to take the larger picture into consideration, so we don't just cut off and say, we're going to achieve harmony here, and I'm not paying any attention to anything else, okay? So we need the larger picture in order to achieve a true harmony. Okay, now where are we here? We're over here, and the glamour of aiming at a personal comfort and satisfaction, peace at any price. Let's just be nice. Let's not stir the pot. Let's keep everything on the up and up so that nobody is disturbed or feels uncomfortable. No, that's not what he's asking from us. But eventually, we will reach a true harmony. And this glamour of war, where we think we're somehow going to rise into some kind of exalted state is not the transfiguration. Now, let's just say that Christ was glorified before the 3 disciples that he took into the desert with him. But the glory of war and the glorification of the transfiguration, this radiation that shines, is not the same. Yeah, and this is good. Someone just put, okay, I don't know where that is right now. It just disappeared on me. It said, yeah, that's right. Here it is. Yeah, midway I stand between the forces which oppose each other. Yes, longing am I for harmony and peace, and for the peace which, beauty which results from unity. I see the two, I see naught else but forces ranged opposing, and I, the one who stands within the circle at the center. Peace, I demand. My mind is bent on it, upon it. Oneness with all I seek, yet form divides. War on every side I find, and separation alone I stand and am. I know too much. And now comes the transition leading to real integration. The love of unity must dominate, and love of peace and harmony, yet not that love based on a longing for relief, for peace to self, for unity, because it carries with it that which is pleasantness. And then comes the resolution in this formula. It's a wonderful formula. I memorized all these formulas, but unless you keep it up. My friend Francis, who's giving these excellent presentations on the wisdom, he said, look, I got into the secret doctrine in terms of memorization, but I found that I had an hour and a half of memorization that had to be repeated every day. And an hour and a half was just too much to make sure that the barnacles did not grow over the memorization. So anyway, the word goes forth from soul to form. Both sides are one. Notice, two merge with one, both sides are one. There is no war, no difference, and no isolation. The warring forces seem to war. From the point at which you stand, move on apace. Excuse me. See truly with the opened eye of inner vision, and you will find not two but one, not war but peace, not isolation but a heart which rests upon the center. Thus shall the beauty of the Lord shine forth. And the hour is now. Something about the fourth ray, it always wants to do it now, in the eternal now, very, very presently in the eternal now. So this is a wonderful quotation, and what I want to do is just see exactly where it comes from. The hour is now, the hour is now.
It's EP2, put the page number at the top, page 363.
360, there it is. Okay, there it is.
360.
Esoteric Psychology 2, page 360. What I have is 363. And yeah, there we are. Okay. Anyway, these are really worth studying. They're wonderful, the 7 techniques of integration. And it shows you how you may move from an integrated state within your personality, but that's not enough. You may be out of integration with your soul. So what do you do as an integrated personality to integrate with your soul as well? Okay, well, thanks, Joe, for putting that in. That's important. That's good. Excuse me. The glamour of conflict with the objective of imposing righteousness and peace. I kind of wonder if Alexander the Great was not afflicted by this particular glamour. He used to conquer these various civilizations and groups, and then he would, the next thing you knew, he would adopt their ways in the attempt to create a kind of harmony. He did this particularly with the Persian nation, and he was wearing Persian. He defeated them. Yes, he did, and then he was wearing all their trappings, their clothes, and imitating them and all that. So he had a lot of the great warriors have had the combination of the first ray and the fourth ray. Napoleon had this, and when I look at Churchill, I think, yeah, I made a mistake in one of my books. I thought it was 1 and 6, but I think Hitler was the 1 and 6, and Churchill was the 1 and 4. So this the first ray types will do this. I'm only fighting to end fighting. Well, it can be true. It can be true, but it also can be an excuse. Simply to engage in conflict and to say my motive is a good one, when in fact you just want to win. Not too much is accomplished by conflict unless the mind is fully present and you understand what you want to achieve. Just to engage in battlefield life just takes away your energy, basically. There is such a thing as what's called a Pyrrhic victory. I guess, was there a Greek Pyrrhus? I don't know. It was one of these classical characters. And yes, he won. But in the process, he not only defeated the opposing army, but he absolutely destroyed his own army. So yes, he won, but in a way, everything had been lost through his victory. So we have to be careful about that too, and choose our battles wisely. Okay. The glamour of vague artistic perception. I guess he's implying here that there is a kind of perception that is not vague and that actually does bring down in meditation, as he says the artist must do in the future, arrangements and beauty that will promote the divine plan. I mean, there are a lot of people on the fourth ray who for quite a while live an unrealistic life, and everything is given to their art or their music or their dance, and they adapt poorly to the world as it is. I think everybody who has been deeply involved in artistry has gone through a period perhaps like this. Maybe some people, if you have a lot of earth signs, maybe you can keep a level head, but this will tune you out of reality and into some kind of vague astral world where things may be very beautiful, but you can't make them work in the world because you're not realistic. Gosh, there's a lot here that I can relate to, I'll tell you. The glamour of psychic perception instead of intuition. Well, we talked about that, didn't we? The astral body is not the buddhic plane. And the psychism about which people tend to be so proud, forgetting that animals have this psychism and that it was an Atlantean development, is just not the straight knowledge, the pure reason of the intuition. It's an easy trap to fall into, and apparently the fourth ray types do fall into this, how to transition from being a pretty good psychic, sensitive, to actually seeing things as they are on the Buddhic plane. Now, the next one is kind of interesting, and it can be linked, I think, with the glamour of vague artistic perception. Why should this be a glamour? The glamour of musical perception. And maybe it's just that you isolate yourself in these apparently artistic worlds and you don't pay attention to what's going on the physical plane and the realism that is required to live well on the physical plane and to manifest on the physical plane what is required. And then the glamour of the pairs of opposites. Now, I'm sure many of us have been involved in this in the higher sense. In other words, it's a soul personality battle. We're not talking about monad versus the soul infused personality. We're talking about the struggle between soul values and personal values. And so everyone goes through certain lives. Maybe we're in one right now, or maybe there's a little recapitulation that we recognize fighting in any case between soul values and the values that the selfish personality may want. I don't know. I guess I've seen everybody that I know at one time or another, at least a little bit, involved in the glamour of the pairs of opposites, probably because we are the fourth kingdom in nature. Whatever your race may be, we are the fourth kingdom in nature. And we have these glamours naturally until we perceive our way out of them through the mind held steady in the light. There's got to be a mental solution here to an astral problem. So is there anybody that would like to speak to any of these particular glamours? Have you had trouble with them? Is there any insight that you have about these glamours that he mentions? That, and there are many more. Like, DK is so sharp, when he looks at somebody, he can name a glamour that you may be the only one that has, he can't put them all down here. He says the names of the glamours are legion, meaning a huge number. So you have your own adaptation of your own particular glamours. And you might say, well, look at the rich young man. What happened to him? He was an initiate of the 3rd degree. That's pretty high. But he was fighting between the monad that the Christ represented and the soul achievements that he had made as a human being. So the battle was simply carried onto a higher turn of the spiral. And sometimes I think, that if you read Master Hilarion, what's the name of that book? Is it the Light of the Soul or something like that? I don't think it's that one. Anyway, it's that little book. I carry it with me all the time, and I've forgotten the title. Maybe someone remembers it, but it's just that little book where Master Hilarion gets to release his full first ray nature. Vera, maybe you have a solution here. You go ahead.
Not solution, but my experience is that there are a lot of problems in the world, and in the esoteric and sort of esoteric community, people think the prevalent view is, no, it's enough when we meditate and radiate peace and love to our environment. My question is always, and who is going to do the action? Not the action like fighting physical, but say in respect of environment, financial industry, there need to be a lot of will and commitment put into it, and it's going to be very difficult. And yeah, it's frustrating to me to hear this. I'm just that's basically what I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, thank goodness not all disciples are on the soft line rays. I mean, we certainly need disciples in the political and financial and scientific and organizational angles, the 1, 3, 5, 7. So, you know, we handle things according to our ashram, whatever that may be, with appreciation for the others, but not thinking that any particular type of person has to do it all. And, you know, to promote understanding between the ashrams, this is something that the new group of world servers has somewhat been able to do. There was some kind of a buddhic interplay going on from about 1925 until the present day, and it really promotes understanding of the different approaches to solving humanity's problem. DK says it's one of the great victories of the Black Lodge that spirituality is conceived strictly in sort of religious sixth ray terms. It's just a big mistake, and it eliminates the wider possibility of considering what spirituality is. You know, anything that really improves the human condition, after all, is spiritual, even if we don't understand from place to place how it happened. So we need that broad understanding, you know, again, and cannot just say, hey, the 246ers know everything. They don't, you know. So hopefully there'll be some people in these other places that will seize their opportunity and their task and do things that we could never do. We have to hope that this is the case, and we do have to promote it if we can. Yeah, we, you know, because like you say, it's going to be very difficult. What he says is that the powers of materialism will fight to the last ditch, to maintain their prerogatives. And you see it right now. You see it in positions of high leadership, such selfishness. Oh my God, you know. But then they have a few things to learn from the soft line rays, and the exchange will and must occur during the Aquarian age. Anything else, Vera?
No, thank you. No.
Okay, you bet. Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Okay, so let's see. Light on the path. That's it. You got it, Kim. Light on the path. Yeah, how could I? But, you know, Master Hilarion is obviously a first ray monad, but his submonadic ray as head of the fifth ray ashram is monadically the fifth. And what is interesting when DK gives the methods of resolution of the rays of aspect onto the rays of attribute onto the rays of aspect, the fifth ray actually majorly resolves into the first ray. So light on the path. And if you read this book, I carry it with me all the time. Kill out this, kill out that, kill out, you know, really it's so first ray. But act as if you were one of the people who were still animated by that power. So you kill out the bad motive, you know, and you preserve the energy. So kill out this, but act as one who has this power, you know. Mabel Collins, that's it, Leslie, you got it. And Mabel Collins was apparently a very, very, from what I've heard, a very independent person, you know, in days when maybe women were not as independent as certainly they are now. And she had a great force, I understand. Well, you all know it, Catherine. Yeah, you got it. I don't know how excuse me, how I forgot it, but all three of you have the right one. Okay, so before we get into our meditation, anybody identifying with these glamours? I certainly, you know, I've had a fourth ray personality for a number of lives, I think. You know, I think it's changing now, but and sometimes, you know, as you reach the end of a particular life, the the ray of your next personality starts to emerge. DK tells us that, and especially if you've been in the arts, sometimes you can have a personality ray which stays the same for quite a number of lives. So I certainly, I could identify with almost everything here. And maybe that's the case for you too, or certain things you might be able to identify as characterizing you at some phase of your life, maybe no longer. If you are I remember, sort of searching for fourth ray souls. And, there are not too many in incarnation yet, but they're coming in now rapidly. And by the time 2025 is reached, we'll have the real influx of the fourth ray souls. And I back in, I wasn't being too successful because, most of the people I knew were on the second ray or the first ray, the way it is in occultism. In DK's groups, if you were on the first ray or the second ray, it almost seems like you had a chance at success. The people who were on the third ray, the sixth ray, the seventh ray in their soul nature, they didn't do as well. They didn't do as well with his instruction as those people who were on 1 and 2. But anyway, back in 1991, I gave a ray seminar in Germany with its fourth ray soul. And it was a big group. And I think I discovered in the way people express themselves and what they wanted out of life, what they were doing, that there were some fourth ray souls in that group. Now, look, when you're looking at the rays of a nation, and you have two rays, one's a soul and a personality ray, one's soul, the other's personality, what it tells you is that in that country, there are a lot of souls on the soul ray of the country, a lot of them. That doesn't mean that only, because, every country has all the soul rays. And this is the important point, a lot of souls who are on the personality ray of that country. Now, the majority of human beings right now, they have the sixth ray or the third ray personality. He tells us that somewhere, okay? Go to the United States, let's say. There's a lot of people with sixth ray souls. That's the personality ray of the country. And it's represented by the souls in that country and not necessarily by personalities, you see. So when we go to the Scandinavian countries here, we're going to expect a lot of people on the seventh ray in their soul, you see. And the same for Russia. And given the Russian temperament, we're going to expect a lot of souls on the sixth ray, the personality ray of Russia. Remember what he says, the new world religion comes out of Russia. So what a combination of 7 and 6 in the soul nature to give us exactly this new world religion. So bear this in mind, that even when you're looking at the personality ray of a country, it is represented by souls on that ray. And that, that may not be an obvious thing, but at least it is what I've discovered to be the case. So is there anything here that you can relate to, that you want to talk about, that you want to question? I think it's really important when dealing with our own glamours that we see what they can do to us, a few, we all have a few prominent ones, and maybe the most prominent are suspicion or paranoia on the first ray, self-pity on the second ray, and criticism on the third ray. all reflected in the rays of attribute lower down on the totem pole, so to speak. So at least to get a fix on what our prevailing glamours may be, and including the glamour of having no glamours, because we've outgrown them all, right? Well, wish on, it's not going to happen right away. And even if you should be one of those who is taking or has taken the third initiation, you still have to be watchful, because you can still fall into trouble until you've sacrificed your causal body. Yeah, and you know what, Alexandra, he says about the second ray, if you feel connected with that, as so many here do, that they really are subject to all the glamours. There's something so inclusive about the second ray that somehow they just absorb all the glamours. At the same time, they have that the brightest of all souls, in terms of the light demonstration, are on the second ray, just like the brightest of the ray lords, that ray lord who's on the fifth ray is the brightest and most advanced of all the ray lords. And just think about Venus with its second and fifth ray component. So indeed, if the second ray is prominent somehow in your nature, the ability to identify with glamours on various rays is pretty strong. I found that to be the case. And how do you get rid of glamour finally? Well, we have our occult methods, but the increasing mental focus and eventual mental polarization, and the ability to hold the mind steady in the light so one can really see what's going on in our desire body. That approach is useful to ridding ourselves of the kind of glamour in which everybody is walking, so to speak. Okay.
Michael.
Tuya.
Michael. Yeah, just could you please define again how DK defines the glamour?
I don't know if I ever did it, but what it's distortion. There is a veil of impulsion on the etheric plane. That's Maya. There is a veil of distortion of the truth on the etheric plane, and that relates to the astral plane and its glamour. There is the next veil on the etheric plane is called the veil of separation, and that relates to illusion. And then there's one more, it's called the veil of aspiration, and it probably relates to the personality that would like to achieve certain things but doesn't take the proper steps and is quite satisfied with simply aspiring and orienting itself towards the higher life, but without doing what is necessary. So for me, a glamour is simply engulfed in wrong desire, a consciousness that is engulfed in a desire which does not lead to truth or reality, to the good, the true, the beautiful. It is a different kind of desire which leads away from the truth. Now, of the Axis powers, we older types, the Second World War is still very, well, for me at least, it's very much in my mind all the time. I don't know why, but the Axis powers, Japan represented Maya, Italy represented illusion, and Germany, the most powerful of all, represented glamour. Now, they had a whole system of desire based on wrong thought and based on separative attitude and based on domination and say racism and all that, about being the master race. Their whole system of aspiration was on defeating the other groups who were to be enslaved, while the Germans manifested as the master race. But as we know from DK, he says there's no pure racial type anymore, and that would have been utterly impossible. So they had a really wrong, distorted desire which was driving them away from the truth, away from reality, away from the plan. This was their distortion, and they put everything they had into it, and that was their glamour. So I always associate the word distortion with glamour. Now, if you've ever been, I'm sorry, if you've ever been to an amusement park, most of us have, you go into the fun house. And in the fun house, there are these crazy mirrors. They're warped and they're all different shapes. And your feet may look this tall and your head may look this tall. And that's distortion. It is, it's such a unbalanced point of view that your desire nature starts longing for things that are not real and have no proportional relationship to each other. It's not true what you desire. And a lot of us fall into desiring the untrue, the unbeautiful, and the bad based on our perceptions. Now, it's very interesting about the fourth ray that he says they take their illusions and they drag them down onto the astral plane and make glamours out of them. Maybe we'll see a little bit more about that as we get on in the book. So, so Alexandra is saying here that the glamours come and go. And look, when you have an astrological chart, you have progressions, astrological progressions. You have astrological directions where everything moves like the sun moves. And the progressions, the 1 day equals 1 year, the energies are always changing. And if you're under a very heavy Pluto transit, let's say, a lot of the glamours that may have been along the first ray line will be accentuated. Same thing for Neptune, it'll be more on the second ray, or Jupiter, see? So the astrology feeds the accentuation of various glamours at different times. But sometimes there's just some prevailing things that are lasting life to life to life. And if we could locate what they are, we, would come closer to what DK calls solving our problem. So, yes, there is mutation, but there's also some rather stubborn skandhas inherited from the past and persisting in the present as a tendency which has a lot of coherency about it and is causing trouble. And DK tried to locate that for his people, and to give them solutions. Well, we don't have him quite now in the same way for all of us, but we do have something. We have his wonderful writing. So maybe we can locate what those are particularly.
Rebecca has her hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I see Rebecca. Oops, you're self-muted, Rebecca. So unmute yourself and yet turn. If I say to you, turn green, you'll know what to do. Okay.
Got it. Thank you very much, Michael. Hello, everybody. And I've just got a question about, is eccentricity a glamour?
Okay, it's interesting because what you've just asked is a Uranian question. It's not. This is the planet of eccentricity and being off the center. And eventually, of course, it can lead to a very good thing. That God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere. See, that's eccentric, not just one center, and whose circumference is nowhere. But people, when they cultivate their eccentricity and use it in defiance of others, not to be cooperative, to put others down, to gain a admiration from others. You see people, let's say what are they doing? They're even having their eyeballs tattooed. You know what I mean? You see some monstrous things that are emerging in terms of how people look. Why are they doing that? And a lot of it is to gain attention. And to stand out and to be noticed and all that. And that plays right into the other glamours about being self-centered and about wanting to be loved and wanting to be praised. And, so eccentricity, it might just be, for instance, a very kind of interesting character who sees things in a different way and is not just going on the normal Saturnian path, but says, hey, we can come at this from another angle. And then people say of him, oh, well, he or she is eccentric. But on the other hand, they may really find something good for humanity. So they're doing it for, in a way, a purpose. But those who do it in order to stand out and to be admired and to be acclaimed and to be different from everybody, that leads right into a host of glamours. So I suppose it's the question of the motive and what it is yielding at any time. Look, let's face it. Einstein, is sort of this embodiment of third ray, fifth ray intelligence, was eccentric. He was, and there are a number of the geniuses who are eccentric, and they contributed something to humanity, which was of great value. And they just had to say, he said, what is common sense? And then he had defined it as an eccentric would define it. It's the sum total of the prejudices you have accumulated up to the age of 17. That's how he defined common sense. So right away, he's not going to be on the straight and narrow path when it comes to the perception of his psyche. He says people are not curious. They don't look at everyday events and say, why is that really happening? But maybe an eccentric would. So it just depends on why the eccentricism exists, because the center occupied by many people may not be revelatory at all. It may be, in fact, a kind of a center that is simply socially, conditioned. And the eccentric may be more on center than the others. On the other hand, the weird eccentric and the weird eccentric groups, and let's just say everybody's dyeing their hair green today and whatever, it's okay, but people dress, act peculiarly for what purpose? And then it falls into glamour pretty easily. At least that's the way I see it.
a lot of artists that I know like to keep themselves off center and cultivate eccentricity and avoid bringing themselves into center because they're worried that if they lose their eccentricity, they'll lose their artistic edge.
I can see that. I really can see that. And they're afraid of conformity and, that it can dull everything down. And they may want to emphasize some aspect of their own nature, which is quite different from other people's, and other people judge them to be eccentric, where in terms of their own expression, they're right where they need to be.
Yes.
Yeah. I know a lot of, and of course there's this stage where you're really, really emphasizing your individualism. You know what I mean? And DK says, hey, most people who are in my groups have been through the period of individual emphasis, and they have also spent a life or two in a convent or a monastery or something like that. And then he gets them, and he trains them further. But let's just say the glorification of the personality sometimes goes along with eccentricity. I mean, look, how did Salvador Dali dress? I mean, the wildest kinds of combinations, but this was all considered self-expression. And only to other people could they say, oh, he's really an eccentric. For him, it might have been right on target. So we cannot judge too quickly. I know people who are changing their names all the time because they found some new strand in their character that they want to emphasize. People will look at them as an eccentric, but maybe they're really onto something. So it has to be examined carefully, I think. And we cannot say eccentricity is always a glamour. We cannot say that, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes, I was just wondering if perhaps glamour could be defined as anything that is off center.
well, it's off the soul center. See what I mean? That's different. But your soul
Yes, I
maybe
see.
maybe asking for a type of expression that other conformist people, oh my goodness, he's beyond the pale, beyond the fence, But in fact, for you, it's absolutely right. It is your soul. It is what's going on. So the judgments of eccentricity have to be carefully analyzed.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, you bet, Rebecca. I'm sure that when a lot of people look at us and what we do and what we study, we do appear pretty eccentric. I sometimes, being a Cancerian type, I tend to get back together with old friends that I haven't known since I was 10 years old, and I sometimes tell them what I'm into, and they've taken a fairly conventional line, and I really look to them like I've lost my mind, and I'm off somewhere where no sane person would be. It just depends on your value system. It's a complicated situation. Well, anyway, yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, let's see. What else there is? Anything? Because I think we're going to meditate very soon now. Yeah, light on the path. I'm not going to forget that again, I say. I think that little book kind of burns a hole in my briefcase. You can't read that book without getting all stirred up. He really is somehow so uncompromising in that book. You just don't have a chance to live a nice, normal, peaceable, non-battling life, See that you battle, but see that you battle for the right cause and for the right purpose and against the right enemy. Master Moria, very peculiar. he used to have his chamberlain, or his advisor or advisors, bring him his enemies list. Well, we haven't heard about this since Richard Nixon. But anyway, his list of enemies. He wanted to review it. Moria wanted to review it to see whether some worthy name had not been added to his enemies list. That doesn't mean he wouldn't oppose such a person, but, taking a very large understanding of the battle, he would realize, move on a pace, and I think that Master Moria very much has the 1, 2, and 4 rays, is my impression. And and King Solomon too, the 1 and 2, somehow he blends 1 and 2, and he's just a great lover of beauty, which brings in the 4th ray. I think those are his rays, and I think they have been prominent in his various incarnations. Okay. All right, friends, I think, maybe that's enough for the moment, and I apologize that I have to speak only in English to people, who are, doing more Finnish or some other language, but I do the best I can under the circumstances. Let's get into our meditation. And as I said, let's revive this business about dictatorship and the sort of self-satisfaction and the self-centeredness that arises from it. I mean, we're going to see everything now, and if Pluto is prominent before the reappearance of the Christ can occur, we're going to see all kinds of stuff just dragged up from the lower depths very disagreeably, and we'll be saying to ourselves, hey, I thought I outlived that, or I thought our nation outlived that stuff, or I thought humanity outlived that. Well, apparently not, because Pluto is very thorough, and it's a cleansing, healing planet. So, we're caught in the 2 arrows, one coming from above, one coming from below, and right there, that's your place. You're being crushed by the will of the soul. At least some of the personality feels crushed under Vulcan, and you're being dragged into the light of day by Pluto, and those two come together, and it's a lot of pressure to change our lives for the better. If we resist it, things will not go in our favor, nor in the favor of humanity. So let's, I say, well, let's get rid of the dictators. Well, I do mean it. For the moment, the dictators have seen their day, and there may be philosopher kings and queens that arise in the future who have been trained over many, many years and are at least 50 years old and understand deeply what is the plan. But all of that has to be cultivated, and right now, turbulent humanity is not quite there. So let's do what we can to throw out the dictators and get the consensus of democracy operating. Churchill had a marvelous quote. I can't, maybe Alex, you could find it, and maybe you did once, I don't know. He just said about democracy, it's the most frustrating and the most, and he went through all of these pejoratives about how bad it was, only to say that it's the best we've got. He was so brilliant in that way in terms of his contrast. And by the way, Churchill was a Sagittarius, but you can't really understand him unless you see that his Mercury was in Scorpio and that late Virgo was rising with the planet Mercury ruling in Scorpio, and that there was some kind of image in the Sabian symbols about how a bald-headed man seizes power, something like that. Anyway, it was one of the Sabian symbols which seemed to characterize him. Now, you can like or hate Churchill. I don't know where people stand. I think he saved Western civilization at a time when other countries were not stepping up to the plate. So I have great admiration for this man, even though I probably couldn't be in the room for 5 minutes with him without feeling so insulted that I had to leave. But, in terms of the greater values, was he an alcoholic? Well, the joke went around that he couldn't live the normal day unless he had had a fifth of bourbon before noon. Okay, I think DK and others might consider that a little bit minor compared to what he did for Western civilization, and then he really proved it later, getting, I think it was the Pulitzer Prize for six volume writing on the history of the English-speaking people. He was really identified with the soul of the English-speaking people, and he knew how to defend it. So sometimes things are not what they seem, and people seem a lot worse than they are or a lot better than they are. You really have to examine it carefully. Okay, so here we go. So just a little quiet as we kind of come together in our task. I guess what we need is enough to realize that wherever we may be located physically, we are working together in consciousness. And of course, our power is multiplied when we work purposefully and harmoniously together. And we use the protective formula with the, long cross. And there is need for protection when working most focally on the astral plane. So then, as a soul, I work in light. And darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So as you make the sign of the cross here, calls it the cross of divinity, visualize the light being traced for yourself and for the whole group. And we focus the three lights, raising the light of matter vitality up to the mental plane, then the light of reason and logic on the mental plane, we can think through something, and it's supported by vitality, and then we watch the two lesser lights being fused and soul light coming down. First to, as it were, find it, if we can find the light of the soul, and that soul light descends also into the area of lower mind and brings illumination and spiritual realization and a sense of the purpose of things. Three lights merge into one light. And we say together, of the three lights which have become one, the light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Okay, so we're going to, out of that triple light, extend our searchlight. Our searchlight detects glamour and helps to dissipate it. That's the point. So together we say the formula and visualize what's happening as we do it, and the searchlight is turning on, shining onto the astral plane as we say this formula. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. And note the difference, inner and subtle. Note the difference. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work, and turn the darkness into day. And the beam of our individual and group searchlights is cast upon the astral plane, searching for the glamour, that we're working on, and also a strengthening of the beam occurs via the spiritual will. And we think about that happening, imagine it happening, the strengthening of our beam. And with the strengthening of our beam, we say together, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Okay, now the glamour we're going to work on is this glamour of dictatorship, which is based on a very narrow point of view, self-satisfaction, not considering the abilities of others. It frequently shows up in the statement, only I can do this, only I, which turns out to be completely false. You know, when Hitler was defeated, he said megalomaniacally, Germany was not worthy of me. Well, dictatorship can turn into megalomania. So, think for a moment of what it has brought to the world. Okay, the stifling of the will of the millions, through which the one great will must work, and instead substituting in a totalitarian manner the will of one. It's a great reduction in what is supposed to happen. There has to be room for everybody. So, let's think now. As we say these words of power, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of dictatorship. There's a great difference between the servant leader, about which we've heard so much in the last few decades, and the self-satisfied, narrow-minded dictator. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour of dictatorship from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of dictatorship. Now we're going to have our moments of silence. We're going to penetrate the glamour. We're going to weaken the glamour. We'll take our 5 minutes of intensity of purpose and silence, and we will work in the way that seems best to us within the group context. 5 minutes of silence. fight for democracy this is a big fight. The members of the Black Lodge do not work through the right use of second ray energy. They pretty much are on the first ray in their soul and the third ray in their monad. So they work through power and manipulation, mostly behind the scenes. And if humanity is not to fall victim to demagoguery, and we see it happening even right now, it has to be educated. That's the problem. Education, that's where we come in. A lot of people on the second ray, education goes with democracy. You have to have an enlightened, fairly enlightened electorate. Otherwise, the demagogue can come along and sway the emotions irrationally and bring in many negative things, many distortions, many illusions, chaos of Maya. So let's see to our role in this great educational effort. He calls it spiritual propaganda or propagation of ideas. Let's do what we can in this century to promote the right education of the people who will be doing the voting. So let us sound, retract our beam, onto the mental plane. We'll use the searchlight again to detect and destroy. And the lights go to where they were. And we'll sound the Om 3 times, acting as if some work has been done on all 3 levels to improve the clarity of the mind, emotions, and energy nature of man. And thus all of us remain alert. And just as in the Raja Yoga book, when thoughts contrary to yoga arise, replace them with thoughts contrary to the contrary thought. This works in our own character, and it works also as we see abuses of thought occurring in the governing and social bodies of civilization. Okay, dictatorship. Now, we continue. It's quite a busy day, and it's 7 o'clock GMT tonight. Tuya has the second of the sacred pentagram in Virgo meditations. Then we break off really quickly, and at 8 o'clock, we go to the pre-full moon in Virgo. That'll be a webinar, but the sacred pentagram will be a broadcast. So I'll try to have everything in order and ready to go, and then depending on where you live and or what the strength of your will is, at 3 o'clock in the morning GMT, we will have the Virgo full moon meditation, and I think it's full moon at finish time. Let's see. It's at
It's
4:34
4:34 a.m. GMT.
Yeah, and actually Yeah, that's correct. And actually, using the Swiss ephemeris 4:32 and 38 seconds, you know how the Swiss are, they're pretty accurate. And so it's right in there. And it'll be a different time for all of you, but do your best to be there because, as DK says, the door opens in such a way that it doesn't open at any other time. So thank you for being here and meditating with us. And we will, I'll transform this into something you can play on your computer, try to get it to you as soon as possible. We had, last night you may not be getting our broadcast on the reappearance of the Christ because we had a lot of problems with our dog in the middle of it all. And it's changing. I had to change over for Tuya, and then she came back. It's okay, but we're not sure whether we send it to you or not. We'll consider that. And we just forge ahead towards the Virgo full moon. And there will be, I think, tomorrow morning we have the full moon meditation. There will be no Ask program. But on Sunday morning, there will be an Ask program on attracting financial resources for hierarchical purposes. Okay? Lots of love, many blessings, and we'll, all of us on staff and bringing you these programs, we wish you all good things. See you soon.